89.9 KMOJ, the People's Station.
89.9 KMOJ, the People's Station. Today's R&B and throwbacks. It's Glam Life Kim, and right now it's time for Minneapolis 360. And I have Mr. Anthony Taylor on the line. How are you today, Anthony?
I'm doing very well today, Kim. I feel a lot more energetic than I have been the last couple of weeks. So I'm doing well. You tell me about you. How are you feeling today?
You know what? I am feeling awesome. The sun is out. It's a beautiful day. Even though it's like 80 degrees, it didn't feel like it to me. It just seems very beautiful. It seems like a great, 72 or so.
It does. It feels comfortable. The heat is not like making you sweat and you don't want to get out the car or leave the house. So
right.
I know I feel like that when it's too hot though. So I think what you've done for me has helped me realize that these days are precious. So enjoy them when they're here because, the freeze is going to turn on here in Minnesota real soon, right?
Absolutely.
So there's going to be snow and ice and rain, but I don't want to talk about that. So that's, I'm bringing bad karma in the air. So don't want to talk about the winter. We'll get to that later because as Minneapolis and Minnesota knows, with winter, we got to talk about snow emergencies and things like that. But let me stop. So I digress. And I want to thank everybody for coming to Minneapolis 360 listening today. My name is Anthony Taylor. I am the African-American Community Specialist for the city of Minneapolis. And again, it's always my pleasure to be able to be on air and be able to talk with you about current things that are happening in Minneapolis. I got a great guest to come on. He's been on before. And I want to get straight to him because there's some new updates. So what we're going to talk about today is the census. And you may ask yourself, well, Anthony, why are we talking about the census? I believe a couple of weeks ago, we had Andrew Virden on, and he talked about the census already. But there are some new developments around census information that I want him to talk about because it's important. Again, we can't underscore the importance of being counted in our community and some of the ramifications of not being counted. It's just that simple, Minneapolis, because we're talking about dollars and we're talking about 10 years and we're talking about our children's future, our community's future. So with this information, I felt it was important to bring on Andrew Virden. He is, again, the Director of Census Operation and Engagement for the state of Minnesota, to talk to us about some of those new developments and also, again, re-emphasize the importance of census. And he did a great job last time. So, Andrew, welcome again back to the program, sir. How you doing today?
Anthony, thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation. I don't usually get invited back to places, so I'm very pleased to be with you again today.
See, you dropped a lot of knowledge to the city of Minneapolis, man. So it was actually my pleasure because one of the things that I liked about how you came on the show a few weeks ago, and I told this to Kim, is that you broke information down to where people can really understand the specifics, right? I think there's a lot of times that folks come on and they just really stay in the high level, in the weeds type information that's really important and relevant. But the way you explained it, I just really appreciated the way that you came to our listeners. So you can always come back, and you probably have you back on again. So thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
I do appreciate that. Thank you, Anthony.
So tell us what's new with the census, right? Because before we gave folks information about when the census is going to end, something's happened. So kind of talk to us about that, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. So because, as we discussed before, COVID came along and, the door knockers were supposed to start going out in the end of April, and then it was going to be the end of May, and then it was going to be the beginning of August. Well, what that did is that pushed back when the end of operations was supposed to be. So there was supposed to be October 31 was supposed to be the end of when an individual could complete the form on their own or that someone could come to their door. Well, what we found out in the last couple of weeks is now they're going to cut the entire month of October out of the field operations, which means that we now only have until September 30th to complete our work. So that's going to that puts a real challenge on all of us, all people living in Minnesota, all people living in Hennepin County, all people living in Minneapolis. We got to make sure that we ourselves are counted by September 30th. We need to make sure that our neighbors are counted for purposes of the census. We got to make sure we get counted because, as you said, we only got this one chance to get it right. You get counted now, or you get forgotten. You get counted now, or you are left out. You are locked out for the next decade. And we're talking about political power. We're talking about financial power. And we're just talking about being counted for purposes of, business uses the census information as well to determine where do we put the next grocery store, where do we put a gas station, where do we put a restaurant. And if you live in a neighborhood where you get undercounted, you're less likely to get those other resources outside of government investment. And we're talking about, hey, why don't I have fresh food in my neighborhood? Well, it might be because your neighborhood was undercounted the last time the census came around, and we do not want that to happen again.
So, Andrew, if I'm a listener, and thank you for giving that information to me. If I'm a listener and I heard you say, well, now it's been limited to, instead of September 31st, it is now going to be, if it was going to be October, now it's September. If I'm a person of color, and that looks shady to me, right? If it feels that if all of a sudden now this happened historically to our communities, is that one thing has happened and then the goalposts are moved, so I feel some type of way about that. Can you kind of go into the decision? And I know it was not yours or the state of Minnesota's, but can you talk about why that happened?
Well, it's complex, but I'll try to keep it simple. Basically, the Census Bureau is required by law to provide the information to the U.S. Congress, and the Congress needs to tell the president by December 31 how many Congress people each state gets. All right, so they had until December 31. Well, when they pushed back the field operations till October 31, they were counting on Congress giving them an extension. So they're giving them an extension to compile all that data. Because they did not get that extension from Congress, means that the Census Bureau did not feel that they were going to be able to compile all the necessary information between October 31 and December 31. That's only 60 days. So that's why they're cutting the field operations short, because that gives them 31 extra days to try to do the compiling of the data. Anthony, all I can say, look, my concern is this, not to get political, but anything that is done with respect to the census, whether it's the questions that are being asked on the census or who's doing the asking of it, or how long we have to ask and gather the data, all of that has the ability to impact the quality of the data that we get out. By cutting 31 days off the end of the census, we stand at risk of undercounting communities which are historically undercounted anyway even further. So that's why we need to redouble our efforts. And so outreach such as your program are a great way to get the word out to people to say, man, this is important. We need to do this. We need to stand up and be counted. We're here. We live here. My school should be as good as your school. The bus stop in my neighborhood should be as good as the bus stop in your neighborhood. Emergency services, jobs, groceries, any of these things. Healthcare, it should be as good in North Minneapolis as it is in South Minneapolis, as it is in St. Paul, as it is in Duluth. We're one Minnesota, and we should all be treated accordingly.
We are talking with Andrew Virden, Director of Census Operation and Engagement for the state of Minnesota, talking about the census. So when you talk about the field operations and how that's going to change, will the census takers still come to my home if I have not completed my census online? Because you talked about maybe field operations changing. Will that still happen with folks coming out, Andrew?
That will still happen, absolutely. In fact, you may have seen census takers out in your neighborhood already. They should be pretty clearly identified. They'll all be wearing a badge around their neck. They'll have a little black bag with the census logo on it. They'll be using like an iPhone, and the iPhone will also have their census logo on it. If you have any questions, if you don't think that they are, in fact, a census taker or something, you can ask them for their badge number. You can ask them for a phone number where they can be verified, and they are required to provide that to you. If you do not wish to give your information to a census taker because of COVID or health concerns, or you just don't have time in that particular moment, you can still call it in, 844-330-2020. They have operators standing by every day from 6 a.m. till 1 a.m., 7 days a week, or you can go to the website, my2020census.gov, and you can complete the form on your own.
Now, and that's great information. I've been in conversation, Andrew, with Alberta Gillespie, who you know well, who's the project
Absolutely.
manager for the city of Minneapolis. And we have weekly meetings regarding census, and we talk about response rates, and we talk about how Minnesota is leading the country in response rates. But, as you dig deeper into the numbers, and I wanted you to kind of talk about this, tell us maybe some communities in Minneapolis where the response rates are happening that are maybe lower or higher. So talk about just specific communities where we may not be getting that response that we need, Andrew.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. Minnesota scores highly on a lot of national measures, right? Whether you're talking about high school graduation rate, college graduation rate, home ownership, low unemployment rates and such. So overall, from a high level, it appears that Minnesota is doing very, very well. But just like those other measures, so Minnesota is leading the country in census response rate right now. But when you start to dig down and you start to look and say, okay, where are the inequalities? I really, truly believe that the census is a matter of equity. There are certain neighborhoods and certain communities which are less likely to be counted. So using Minneapolis as an example, a couple of neighborhoods where the response rate is low, where they're more heavily populated with African Americans, right? Jordan neighborhood, Hawthorne neighborhood, around the University of Minnesota, Como, Whittier. These are all neighborhoods with a response rate of right around 50%. Keep in mind that right now, Minneapolis as a whole is at 71.3%. So that means that these neighborhoods are about 20% less than the city as a whole. So let me tell you some other characteristics that might make a neighborhood have a lower response rate, right? Communities of color is a big one, but immigrants, non-native English speakers, low educational attainment, renters. Renters is actually the number one predictor of whether the neighborhood you live in has a high or low response rate is how many renters live there. If you live in a neighborhood with a lot of apartments and a lot of renters, like I do in Stevens Square, the response rate is low. If you live in an area, perhaps more affluent area, but if you live in an area where the number of renters is low, the response rate is higher. So like Lake of the Isles, Kenwood neighborhood, the response rates are very high because home ownership is also high. General wealth is very high. But when you look at, like I said, Hawthorne neighborhood, Cedar Riverside neighborhood, Whittier neighborhood, the response rate is significantly lower, in large part due to the number of renters in those areas.
Well, and I just want to reiterate this again. I know I can't say it enough, Anthony, and every time, I'm probably, Andrew, the last time you were on, I'm sure I said it, but I think a lot of times, especially in the areas, as you mentioned, where there's a lot of renters or in areas with communities of colors, a lot of times, sometimes, we allow other family members or people to live with us who may not have a place at the moment or, it's going through whatever, and for whatever reason, we just don't want it to get out that there's more people staying there than they should, right? So I just want to reiterate again to all of you listening that the census, and we talked about this, there's a fine if they tell this information. It's confidential. So it doesn't matter how many people you have staying in your home, that will not get leaked. It's very important to make sure that you get counted because your kids, our kids, your other family members, they will need this money in the future.
Absolutely.
I am so glad you brought that up because that is very, very, very important. Any information you give the Census Bureau about yourself, about your household, is confidential for 72 years. That means that this information collected for the 2020 census will not be available on an individual basis until the year 2092. I will long have left this earth by the time my information will be available, right? So that means your information is safe, whether you're talking about the IRS or the FBI or ICE or the Minnesota Department of Revenue, or Child Protective Services, or a creditor, or your landlord, your neighbors. No one else can get this information, awesome. And so there is no penalty for you, giving this information to the census. There is, however, a substantial fine for the census taker for divulging that information, and that could be up to 5 years in federal prison and $250,000. Right? I don't care how juicy a story I can tell you about Department 1C. I'm not giving you 5 years of my life and $250,000 so I can tell someone that. Right. Tell someone your business.
And that's a great point. And, what's interesting about that is after you got off the air last time, Andrew, me and Glam Life had a conversation about that, right? And she brought that up again, and I'm so glad she did, because it's not worth it. Right, it's not worth it. These folks are serious business when it comes to collecting census data. So, and I'm glad she brought that up and you reiterated that too. And one of the things that I think is important too, as we talk about the census, is our upcoming election. Right. So the Trump administration, we all know that in November we will be out to vote. So again, this is my plug for folks to get out and vote. But we also understand some of the shenanigans, and for lack of a better word, that the Trump administration is putting out there, right, to divide us in our country along racial lines, along gender lines, religion, everything. And one of his tactics is the exclusion of unauthorized immigrants from using the census to divide up congressional seats. So kind of talk to us about what that means for residents who aren't citizens who need and would love to complete the census.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Anthony, because that's come up quite a bit. The fact of the matter is the U.S. Constitution is very clear. The census shall be a count of all living persons in the United States every 10 years. The Constitution uses the term citizens half a dozen times. But in this, which says to me that the framers of the Constitution, the people who wrote the Constitution, understood what the difference was between a citizen and a person. And when they talked about the census, they very clearly used the term person. There shall be a count of all persons living in the United States. That means everyone should be counted. As long as you were alive on April 1 of 2020 this year, you need to be counted. It doesn't matter if you are a baby. It doesn't matter if you're 104 years old. Doesn't matter if you're a citizen. Doesn't matter if you have a criminal record. Doesn't matter if you are behind on your taxes. It doesn't matter if you are who you are, what the status or station in life is. Every single person shall be counted by the census. Now, I know that's a lot easier said than done, and I understand that for a lot of people, they may have trepidation giving this information to the government. The reality is the Constitution is very, very clear. It says that all persons shall be counted, and that's what we want in Minnesota, too. We want all people in Minnesota, all people in Minneapolis, all people in your neighborhood to get counted, and you can be helpful in that regard. Not only filling out the form yourself, but as we get closer to that September 30th deadline, a census taker may come to you, Anthony, and say, Anthony, knock at your door. You've already filled out your form. I know you have, Anthony, because we've talked about this. You've already filled out your form. The census taker could come to your door and say, "Excuse me, I'm looking to get some information about your neighbor. Do you know, was that house occupied on April 1st? Do you know how many people were living there? Oh yeah, it was two men, a man, a wife, and a small child. What's approximately their age?" The census taker might ask you some very broad information about that person. The census taker has been unsuccessful getting that information. You can provide that information. You don't have to give a name. You don't have to give personal information about that person. But that's one way that you can help. You can help make sure that it gets counted. Because if you, Anthony, don't give the census that particular bit of information, the census might just say, "Okay, boom, we'll just say that no one lives in that house." Well, the reality is it could be actually a 3-generation family of 10 or 11 people who are living there. And it's better that the Census Bureau get a little bit of information about that home or about that residence than that the Census Bureau walks away and says, "Yep, nobody lives there." Because that I fear, Anthony, that is what happened in 2010 in the Hawthorne neighborhood, in Jordan neighborhood, in zip codes 55411, 55412. Too many homes were marked as zeros when you had people living there. And that resulted in a decrease in the official population of those neighborhoods. That meant a decrease in the funding that the state government put into it, that the Hennepin County government put in it, that city of Minneapolis put into it. It results in things like so maybe you don't have fresh food available, right? Maybe it means there aren't good jobs available. Maybe the transportation options require that you have to connect via downtown, or you have to wait 20 or 30 minutes between buses, because according to the census, zip code 55411, 55412 lost 7,123 people. I don't believe that was actually the case. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's actually the case. So very important that we get that count right. What happened after the last census is North Minneapolis lost one city council member on city council, right? We have 13 members of the city council in Minneapolis. Up until 2010, North Minneapolis had 3 representatives. Now North Minneapolis only has 2. That means there's one fewer person at City Hall who's fighting for resources for North Minneapolis. It means it's easier for them to make a decision like, let's close North High, right? And that's not right. And that's why we got to make sure that everyone gets counted.
That's a great point, Andrew, and I'm glad you said that, because those are folks that speak for community, and as we talk about some of the many issues that are happening in our city, we need those voices in city council, and especially some of the upcoming things like police reform and also the issues around 38th and Chicago, right? I think that's just a beautiful way that you described that, because now we're down one voice in government for community. So I'm really glad you say that. And as we run up against the clock, Andrew, I want you to talk about this one thing. And you did this so well. And again, Minneapolis, I know we've talked about the census before, but if you haven't listened to Andrew the first time and you listen to him again, this is one of the most important things that he has said before. And it's about the dollars that are allocated for census, because the census tells a story. What Andrew's been trying to say is that if the story says that there are not as many people in these community, then these dollars won't be allocated to that community. So, Andrew, talk about the specific dollars and cents when it comes to census.
And how they're allocated.
Absolutely. So a very conservative estimate says that approximately $880 billion are allocated from the federal government to the states on the basis of the census count every single year. Minnesota's share of that is approximately $15.5 billion, which means on a per-person basis, that's $2,796 per person per year in money that comes from the federal government. And because we only do the census once every 10 years, that means we're talking about $28,000 per person per decade on the basis of the census count. And that's for things like SNAP, WIC, S-CHIP. This is about free and reduced lunch programs. This is about transportation assistance programs. This is about job training programs, GED programs, education, roads, transportation, hospitals, unemployment benefits. All of these things are all tied to the census. So that's a lot of money. Now, keep in mind, $2,796 per person per year. That does not include money that St. Paul might also appropriate on the basis of the census count. That does not include money that the Hennepin County may also appropriate on the basis of the count. That does not include money that the city of Minneapolis might also assign to say, well, the Jordan neighborhood is going to get such and such dollars because they got so many people, right? So it's important that we all get counted. This is real money here. This is not, this is not couch cushion money. This is real money.
And it's definitely important. Kim, did you have something for Andrew before we are off?
Not right offhand. I know we've touched this a lot of times, and I just, want to reiterate to our listeners again, this is very important, you guys. When you're wondering why your neighborhood doesn't look, or why you don't have parks or all these, different things that can enhance the neighborhood, and you're looking at other people's neighborhood, like, why do they have it? Well, maybe because they have more people filling out their census forms. So I just, want to reiterate again the importance of getting these completed.
Absolutely. And Andrew, if I need help completing the census, where can I go?
So you folks can still go to, you can call 844-330-1400. 2020, 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m., which is terrific. There's also my2020census.gov. You can go online. You can fill that out. And if you don't do either one of those, you can expect that a census taker will come knocking to your door. Now, they'll be wearing a mask. They'll have their badge. They'll have their little bag. There'll be social distancing, and they can help you complete the form in person if you would prefer.
We are with Andrew Virden, the Director of Census Operation and Engagement for the state of Minnesota. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. You, again, have been real helpful with the information, and I thank you much.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you both. Have a great day.
You too.
I mean, Kim, we can't talk about it enough, right? When we talk about census and how it's important, and if you just look at the dollars and the timeline, and I know there's so many other things going on in our community that we are worried about, and in a pandemic, and with children still not able to go to school in Minneapolis until maybe possibly 2021. Some of the things that we still have to keep in the forefront is census and the importance of it, and dispelling some of the false narratives that are out there regarding taking the census, because it's all about the dollars that are going to community and resources.
It is. And, I think that, it's a hard one, but even with that, I know for some people, it's like, let's not just think about yourselves, though. We got to think about our babies and, our future, because just to think right now, we think the cost of living is high, but just to think, 10 years from now, how high it's going to be. So, every little penny counts.
It does. So I want to thank Andrew for coming on. One thing before we go, too, is I want to plug something that's happening. I think as we have gone and we've lived our lives in this COVID-19 time, COVID is still happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So COVID is still here. So I want to make sure I get this information out to folks before we get out of here, and that there is a free COVID testing site next Tuesday, August 25th, at Pica Head Start, the McKnight Early Childhood Center, Development Center at 4225 3rd Avenue South. All people are welcome to this event. It is free testing. There will be Somali, Spanish, and Hmong interpreters will be on site. The good thing is that you'll be able to get your results in 2 days. It is free. You can drive up. You can walk up. It is really, really important that folks know this information about where they can go to get tested. Again, it's free. It is at Pica Head Start McKnight Early Childhood Family Development Center, 4225 3rd Avenue South. So, folks, please get out there. If you need to get tested, it is free. I was actually at the Fraser Pica Head Start 2 weeks ago at the same event, and there were almost 800 people who came through there, Kim. So I thought that was really great.
How long did it take? Like, was it a long wait?
It is not a long wait, and I'm glad you said that too. It is from 11 to 7. And the way they had it set up, Kim, in Minneapolis, is that it was really, really, your wait time, and I was there for most of the day, your wait time was really just about maybe from 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
That folks can get in there and get tested.
That's
and
awesome.
you can bring your babies, you can stay in your car, you can walk up, but it's free. So
wow. And 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and that's tomorrow?
It is next Tuesday, August 25th. So folks can get out there and go and get tested. So
awesome. Thanks for that information.
Kim, I wish we had an hour, right?
I know. It's never enough
to do
time.
this show. The time always seems to run out. But again, I hope this was helpful to Minneapolis. I'm so glad to be able to bring this information to you. We're at that time, Minneapolis. I want to thank you. I will see you in 2 weeks. This is Minneapolis 360.
One love, kings and queens. On the way is Zany K.